The stars were quiet. From the observation deck of the Drazathi flagship Volzekor, space stretched cold and endless. Dozens of ruined Earth ships floated in the void, twisted steel and shattered hulls drifting like forgotten bones. The once proud Terran fleet had been wiped away, and the last human stronghold had gone silent 2 days ago. Supreme Commander Salvor watched with satisfaction, his 6 golden eyes blinking slowly. Behind him, banners of victory fluttered in artificial breeze, etched with the Drazathi symbol for dominion complete. All resistance has ended, his aide hissed, voice smooth as oil. The Terran Confederacy is no more. Zalvor let out a slow exhale, thick steam curling from his breath. Then mark this day in the history grid. The war is over. The galaxy belongs to us. Below, the fleet began broadcasting the victory across every channel. Billions across the stars saw the footage. Human cities in ruins, Terran officers on their knees, Drazathi troops planting flags on Earth soil. A voiceover declared the end of the war with cold finality. The human threat has been extinguished. And then, the signal cracked. Static buzzed. Screens flickered. For a moment, Salvor's expression shifted, one of his eyes twitching. A new voice pushed through the noise. Rough, confident, human. You forgot rule number 1. Silence fell across the bridge. The crew stared at the screen. Static snapped into a grainy image, a man in a tattered Terran officer's jacket. He was unshaven, scared, his eyes bright with something between madness and fire. Captain Elias Knox. Dead, or so they thought. He leaned closer to the camera, grinning. Never count a human out. The screen cut to black. Zalvor's claws clenched, scraping deep grooves into the command rail. Where is he? He growled. No one answered. Knox was gone. Somewhere, in the darkness beyond their maps, a ghost of the old Earth still burned. Far away at the edge of known space, a battered cruiser powered up its engines. Inside, Captain Knox stood alone in the control room, watching the stars twist into motion. He didn't smile now. His hand rested on a cracked photo of Earth, taped to the console. Cities in sunlight, blue oceans, people laughing. All gone, but not forgotten. Broadcast went out. A young voice said over the intercom, Leah, a tech salvaged from the ruins of Mars. You just told the galaxy we're still breathing. Good, Knox replied. Let them wonder. He turned to the viewport, watching as distant stars slid past. We're not dead, he muttered. We're just getting started. Outside, the cruiser disappeared into the black, silent, invisible, waiting. And somewhere out there, the reckoning began. The hidden cruiser glided through the dark like a shadow with purpose. No lights, no beacons, just the soft hum of life still clinging to metal. Captain Elias Knox stood in the center of the command deck. Around him, the last few survivors of Earth's War Council worked in silence. Each carried wounds, some visible, others buried deep behind tired eyes. But they were alive, and that meant the fight wasn't over. We're picking up whispers on the outer comms, said Leah, her fingers dancing across the cracked console. The Drazathi are trying to trace the signal you sent. They're panicking. Knox grinned. Good. Let them waste time. The ship's walls groaned as it slipped through a collapsing wormhole, a back door carved by a forgotten Terran experiment. On the other side, wreckage, debris fields, and ghosts of battles long lost. Status? Knox asked. Lieutenant Juno, once a fleet strategist, turned her chair. No living colonies. Just bones and blackouts. We're deep in dead space now. Knox nodded. Perfect place to hide an army. He tapped a blinking light on the console. A small hologram sprang to life. A map of the galaxy riddled with red zones and faded blue lines. Earth's territories were ashes, but there were still flickers of hope. Resistance cells, scattered refugee fleets, old allies turned exiles. Knox pointed to 3 blinking dots near the edge. Get me the Helix Forge team, the K'Vari priests, and the bioengineer from the Vanta Ring. If anyone's crazy enough to help us, it's them. Some of them fought against us, Juno said carefully. Nox stared at the flickering stars. And now they have the same problem we do. Elsewhere, across the galaxy, Supreme Commander Xalvor stormed into the Drazathi war chamber. Holograms showed scattered human ships reactivating, rebel chatter spiking in fringe systems, and worst of all, a Terran voice echoing across black market channels. Rule number 1. The phrase was spreading, becoming a spark. Find him, Salvor roared. Burn every shadow. Tear apart every moon. I want his name scrubbed from time. But it was already too late. The story of the dead human captain who mocked the Empire was alive. And in the Drazathi Empire, stories traveled faster than truth. Back on Nox's cruiser, the lights flickered. An alarm chirped softly. Ship detected, behind us. Laya shouted, no Drazathi signatures, but it's not friendly. Nox didn't flinch. Prepare for contact. Through the viewport, a jagged ship emerged, scavenged metal, crude engines, and wild energy bursts. A war relic from another era. Nox cracked his knuckles. That, he said, stepping toward the loading bay, is either a friend who wants to kill me, or a killer who might want to help. The ship groaned again as airlocks opened. Nox smiled. Let's remind them why humans don't stay buried. The docking bay doors hissed open, revealing the twisted wreckage of a ship that shouldn't have been flying. It looked like it had been pieced together by a drunken mechanic with a hatred for symmetry. A mix of alien parts, salvaged human tech, and unidentifiable hull plates welded together with barely enough precision to keep it intact. Sparks flickered from exposed wiring, and the faint scent of burnt ozone hung in the air. Captain Nox didn't bat an eye. He stepped forward, scanning the approaching figures. From the shadows, 2 tall, insectoid forms emerged. Their exoskeletons gleamed black and gold in the dim light, their heads adorned with ridged plates that made them look like walking war statues. But it wasn't the aliens that made Nox's pulse race. It was the human woman in the middle. She stood tall and proud, her black armor scuffed with battle marks. Her dark eyes locked with his immediately, cold, calculating. But there was something else there, something familiar. Her lips twisted into a smirk. Nox, she said, her voice a low, dangerous rasp. You're still alive. Funny thing, I didn't think I'd see you again. Nox exhaled sharply. And yet here we are. Severin. Sergeant Severin, once a high-ranking Terran officer, now turned mercenary leader. She had been one of the first to fight against the Drazathi when the war started, and one of the first to abandon Earth when the tide turned. Her people, the human survivors, had scattered across the stars. Some had joined pirate crews, others fled into lawless regions of the galaxy. Severin had taken the hard road. Now she was the leader of a ragtag army made up of humans and the leftover, forgotten races, the ones who'd never fit in anywhere else. You think you can just waltz in here and ask for help? Severin took a step closer, her eyes scanning his crew. What do you want, Elias? Help, he said, flatly. You're the only ones left who can still fight. Severin raised an eyebrow. And you think I'm going to throw my soldiers into the fire for a dying cause? I left Earth for a reason. Nox didn't flinch. Earth's not dead. It's just sleeping. You know that better than anyone. Severin's jaw tightened. For a moment, her gaze faltered. The words of the dead haunted her. Families, friends, and soldiers lost in the firestorm. But something in her hardened again. She crossed her arms. I'm no fool, she said. I'm not just going to risk my crew for a dead world. The Drazathi are coming for everyone now, not just you. Nox's eyes narrowed. Exactly. And if we don't stop them, there won't be anyone left to fight. The 2 insectoid soldiers shifted behind Severin, making soft clicking sounds with their mandibles, subtle, but a reminder of the power they controlled. Severin glanced back at them. then at Nox. The room fell into a heavy silence. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady. "Fine. But this isn't a charity. You owe us, Nox, and if you screw us over, you'll be the first to know." He cut in, his grin sharp. "You have my word." Severin studied him for a long moment before nodding. "All right, we'll help you. But you better have a damn good plan." Nox's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with a cold resolve. "You'll see." He turned to his crew, signaling them to prepare for what came next. Severin's forces joined them, an uneasy alliance forged from the desperation of survival. As the two crews exchanged wary glances, Nox felt the weight of what they were about to do. The odds were impossible. The Drazathi were too strong, their empire too vast. But the one thing they had forgotten was that they had never fought a human who was truly desperate. "Let's remind them," he muttered under his breath. "Never count a human out." The lunar surface gleamed under the light of a distant sun, a stark, silver wasteland where nothing grew, nothing moved, except for the flicker of human-made machines. Below the barren dust, in a cavern sealed from the light of day, the Drazathi research outpost hummed with quiet menace. Captain Nox stood in front of a makeshift map, his eyes scanning the glowing coordinates. His crew had spent the last 2 days traveling the dark side of the moon, avoiding detection as they neared the hidden research facility. The objective was simple: infiltrate, steal classified data, and destroy whatever the Drazathi were hiding beneath the surface. But the stakes, those were anything but simple. "This is it," Nox said, his voice steady. "We take out their relay, and we'll have a shot at slowing their command network. If we fail, Earth won't just be lost, it'll be forgotten." Severin stepped up, her arms crossed as she examined the lunar surface on a tactical screen. "Your timing is excellent," she said with a smirk. "The Drazathi think they're untouchable now. This'll rattle them." Nox glanced over at her. "That's the plan. Let's make some noise." He nodded to Leia, who stood at the control panel. "Ready the extraction ships. We're going in hot." Leia's fingers flew over the controls. Extraction ships locked and loaded. "We're clear to launch in 3, 2, 1. A sharp hiss rang through the air as the ship's rear hatch opened. A chill rushed in, but the team barely flinched. Severin's soldiers, armed to the teeth with scavenged weapons, lined up behind Nox. The time for talking was over. The drop. A sudden burst of gravity tossed them all forward as the pods ejected from the mothership. The void of space wrapped around them as the descent began, slow at first, then faster, the moon's surface growing larger with every passing second. Nox's heart pounded in his chest as the ground approached, the gritty, gray dust rising like a storm ahead. He glanced over at Severin, who gave him a sharp nod. No words were needed. This was their moment. The pods hit the surface with a heavy thud, sending up a cloud of moon dust. Nox's boots slammed into the ground, and he was immediately up, weapon in hand. The team spread out, forming a tight perimeter. The research facility was only a few clicks away, but it was heavily guarded. "Move out," Nox commanded. The team moved as one, their steps synchronized, their breaths steady but urgent. They had trained for this moment. The Drazathi had underestimated them. They thought Earth's soldiers were done, but they were wrong. The assault. They approached the outpost under the cover of darkness, creeping through narrow lunar ravines and jagged rock formations. As they neared the facility, the faint whine of Drazathi sentries echoed through the silence. Nox held up a fist. "Stop." He signaled to Severin, who immediately pulled out a small drone from her pack. The drone buzzed to life, lifting off silently into the night. Its infrared sensors scanned the perimeter, and within moments, the layout of the outpost appeared on the small screen. "2 guards on the left, 1 on the right," Severin whispered, pointing to the map. "The relay is in the center, heavily shielded." Nox's eyes narrowed. "We take out the guards first, then the relay. No mistakes." With precision, The team moved into position. Severan's soldiers dealt with the guards, silent as shadows, swift as predators. Nox led the charge to the relay. Each step, each movement was a well-rehearsed dance of survival. When they reached the relay, Nox stopped just short of the door. His heart raced as he punched in the access code they had stolen earlier from a Drozathi tech officer. The door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, a sea of blinking consoles and alien tech lit up the room. Nox didn't hesitate. He smashed the central terminal, sending sparks flying. "Now," he shouted. Leia was already on it, typing in commands. Seconds ticked by like hours. The countdown to the facility's self-destruct had begun. The escape. "Exfil is 30 seconds out," Leia called over comms, her voice tight with urgency. Nox gave one last look at the glowing data streams on the screen before turning toward the exit. They had done it. The relay was down. The Drozathi would be blind for hours. It was enough. The ground shook as explosions rocked the facility. Nox turned to Severin. Time to go. The team sprinted back toward the drop zone, their breaths loud in the sudden chaos. Behind them, the research facility erupted into a ball of flame and debris. The extraction ships were already waiting. As they boarded, Nox allowed himself a single moment to look up at the dark sky, knowing they had just made the Drozathi blink. They would never see humanity coming. The roar of the engines filled the air as Nox's ship tore through the blackness of space. The mission was far from over. If anything, it had only just begun. The Drozathi were wounded, but they were far from beaten. "Truton Prime is next," Nox said, his voice calm but laced with determination. He stood in the middle of the command room, eyes fixed on the holographic map projected in the center of the table. The glowing dots of enemy fleets surrounded Truton Prime, a strategic fortress world at the edge of Drozathi territory. "We don't have long," Juno said, glancing at the monitor. "The Drozathi are already preparing to retaliate. This planet's heavily fortified." Nox nodded. "Which is why we're not going in hot. We're going to blind them, disrupt their defenses, and hit them where it hurts. Their comms network needs to come down." Severin stepped forward, her boots thudding against the deck. "And what about the ground forces? What's the plan there?" Nox didn't hesitate. "We'll take out their relay stations. Once we knock out communications, the Drozathi won't know what hit them. Then we make our exit before they can react." Severin raised an eyebrow. "A little confidence wouldn't hurt." Nox's grin was sharp, his eyes gleaming with a mix of humor and something darker. "Confidence? No, I just know what humans can do when we've got nothing left to lose." Truton Prime. The storm. The ship entered Truton Prime's atmosphere, the heat of entry rattling the hull. From above, the planet seemed peaceful, lush, green plains stretching across the continents, cities gleaming beneath the clouds. But Nox knew better. This world had become a symbol of Drozathi dominance, a perfect fortress waiting to be shattered. On the ground, the team was already in position. They had taken advantage of a brief blackout in the planet's outer defenses, allowing them to land just outside the Drozathi stronghold. The mission was simple: infiltrate the main comm tower, plant the disruption devices, and exfiltrate before the enemy realized what had happened. Nox led the charge, Severin's mercenaries following close behind. The air was thick with tension, the metallic scent of the ground beneath them mingling with the coolness of their breaths. No one spoke as they moved through the tall grass, keeping low and silent. The Drozathi wouldn't be fooled for long. 30 meters to the tower, Leia whispered into Nox's earpiece. Nox raised his hand, signaling the team to stop. They crouched low behind the cover of a massive rock outcrop, peering toward the towering structure of the communications relay. It loomed over the landscape, a jagged spire of metal and glass surrounded by heavy defenses, automated turrets, guard patrols, and patrol craft overhead. Nox studied the movements of the guards, his sharp eyes picking out patterns in their patrol routes. "Now," he muttered, With deadly precision, Severin's soldiers moved like ghosts, silent, quick, and efficient. Within moments, the first guard dropped, followed by another. The team worked like clockwork, clearing the area around the relay with ruthless speed. Nox and Severin made their way to the tower's base. He slapped a disruptor charge onto the control panel, watching as the red light flickered to life. "We've got 5 minutes before this place goes dark. Move." They raced up the exterior of the tower, scaling it like experienced climbers, using the shadows to remain unseen. The hum of energy vibrated through the air, and Nox could feel the pulse of the relay as it drew closer. Lia's voice crackled through the comms. "We've got incoming. Drozathi ships are approaching from orbit. You've got less than 3 minutes." Nox's heart raced. The countdown had begun. They needed to finish what they started and get the hell out. He reached the top of the tower, his breath steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. The charge was set. With a final glance over the city, Nox triggered the detonator. The breakthrough. The tower exploded in a deafening burst, a shockwave rippling through the ground and sky. The lights on the planet blinked out as the comm systems collapsed. For a moment, the entire world went dark, silent, isolated. "Go," Nox shouted. "Get to the extraction point now." The team scrambled down the tower, dodging incoming blasts from the Drozathi fighters now circling above. The exfil was in full swing, but the enemy was already closing in. Nox didn't look back as the ground shook beneath him. The Drozathi would regroup. But today, they'd remember what it was like to lose control. The explosion had sent shockwaves rippling across the sky, and the world below trembled in its wake. Nox's team raced toward the extraction point, the ground beneath them quaking as Drozathi ships swooped low, their dark silhouettes cutting through the smoke-filled air. The moonlit surface of Truton Prime, once calm and serene, was now a war zone. "Faster." Severin barked, pushing her squad forward. The sound of approaching enemy forces grew louder, the distinct hum of Drozathi combat ships cutting through the night. The mission was supposed to be quick, but now it was a race against time. Nox's heart pounded as he scanned the horizon. The extraction point wasn't far, but the Drozathi had already sent in reinforcements, fighters closing in fast. He could see the telltale signs of their energy weapons charging, ready to unleash hell. "Leah, get the dropship ready," he said, his voice grim. "We don't have much time." "Already on it," came the crackling response from Leah. "Engines are hot. I'm clearing a path." Ahead, the shimmering outline of the extraction ship appeared, its engines flaring bright as it rose, a beacon of hope in the chaos. But the enemy was closing in too quickly. Nox could already see the first wave of Drozathi interceptors approaching. "Incoming," shouted Juno, her voice tight with urgency. Nox didn't hesitate. He grabbed the nearest weapon, a plasma rifle, and turned to Severin. "We need to buy Leah time. Hold them off for just a few more minutes." Severin gave a sharp nod, her soldiers quickly falling into position. The air around them crackled with the sounds of distant weapons fire, and the ground shook again as another explosion rocked the planet's surface. The first Drozathi fighters appeared, sleek, deadly ships, their dark hulls gleaming in the moonlight. They swooped down, firing their deadly energy blasts. Nox didn't wait for them to hit any closer. He lifted his rifle, steadying his breath. A burst of green plasma shot from the weapon, slamming into the lead fighter. It faltered, its engine sputtering. The Drozathi pilot didn't have time to recover. A second shot from Nox's team finished it off, sending the wreckage plummeting to the ground in a fiery ball. More fighters appeared, swooping down with blistering speed. Severin's team fired in unison, their weapons roaring as the Drozathi retaliated with precision strikes. Nox dove behind a boulder, his eyes never leaving the chaos unfolding around him. His soldiers fought with relentless focus, but it was clear the Drozathi weren't going to let them escape so easily. "Leah, how long?" Knox shouted into the comms. 15 seconds, came the response. I got you covered, but make it quick. Knox's pulse quickened. The enemy was closing in, their fire growing more intense with every passing second. He glanced back at the extraction ship, now hovering just above the surface. The Drazathi were relentless, their fighters circling like vultures, waiting for the right moment to strike. Everyone, fall back, Knox ordered. We've got to make it to the ship now. He sprinted toward the extraction point, his soldiers following close behind, firing at the Drazathi forces as they retreated. Plasma blasts whizzed past, narrowly missing their marks, but the team pushed forward. The ground beneath their feet shook again, this time with the thunderous roar of a Drazathi assault ship breaking through the atmosphere. Severin didn't hesitate. She tossed a grenade into the air, sending it hurtling toward the assault ship. The explosion ripped through the sky, sending a massive shockwave that rattled their bones. The assault ship veered off course, spiraling into the atmosphere before crashing into the distant mountainside. That's how you make an entrance, Severin said, flashing a grin. But Knox didn't smile. His eyes were fixed on the extraction ship. They were almost there. The moment they reached the ship's lowered ramp, Laya's voice crackled over the comms again. Go, go, go. Without looking back, Knox and his team rushed up the ramp, the doors closing behind them just as the first wave of Drazathi reinforcements arrived. The ship shot upward, blasting through the atmosphere, the fiery wreckage of the planet below fading into the distance. As they soared into the safety of deep space, Knox let out a long breath, the adrenaline beginning to ebb from his system. They'd won this battle. But the war was far from over, and the Drazathi would not forget what had happened on Truton Prime. The stars outside the viewport streaked by, their light distorted as the ship's engines pushed them further into the unknown. The hum of the engines was the only sound that filled the cockpit as Knox sat, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. He didn't speak. His mind was far away, replaying every moment of the mission. Truton Prime had been a success, but not without cost. The Drazathi had learned a hard lesson that day, but they weren't the type to forget or forgive easily. And as much as Knox wanted to believe their message had been clear, he knew the galaxy's most ruthless empire wouldn't let such an embarrassment go unpunished. Severin walked into the cockpit, her eyes sharp with the same tension that gnawed at him. She didn't sit, but leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. We're not done yet, she said, her voice low. Knox glanced over at her, his jaw tightening. I know. We've kicked the hornet's nest. Now we wait for them to swarm. Severin nodded, her gaze shifting to the tactical screen showing the movements of the Drazathi fleet. There was something darker in the lines of red indicating their positions, something different. They're mobilizing faster than expected, she observed. Looks like they've already sent reinforcements. That attack on Truton Prime, it was just the beginning. Knox ran a hand over his face. We gave them a bloody nose, but now we've got their full attention. The question is, where will they strike next? The intercom buzzed, and Laya's voice crackled through. Captain, we've got incoming. Drazathi warships, large fleet, heading right for us. The words landed like a punch. Knox didn't need to ask how close they were. He could already feel the tremor in the hull as their ship's sensors began to light up with alerts. Battle stations, Knox barked. Severin, get the crew ready. We're about to show these aliens what humanity can do when pushed too far. Severin turned and sprinted toward the engine room, and Knox followed her with a heavy sense of resolve. The crew scrambled into position, their faces grim but determined. They had come too far, endured too much, to let the Drazathi crush them now. Outside, the void seemed to grow darker as the enemy ships closed in. Knox could see them now, massive warships, their sleek surfaces designed for intimidation. Each one was a monument to the Drazathi's might, and they weren't here for a negotiation. They were here for revenge. Laya's voice rang out through the intercom again. They're locking onto us. Weapons charging. This isn't going to be pretty. "Target the lead ship," Nox said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his pulse. "Full power to the shields. Prepare the cannons." The ship shuddered under the force of the first enemy blast, the shields flaring brightly as they absorbed the impact. Nox gripped the controls, his mind calculating their next move. He had to be smart, quick. If they couldn't outgun the Drazathi, they'd have to outmaneuver them. The ship pitched to the left, narrowly avoiding a second blast. The warships were closing in, but Nox's eyes were locked on the lead ship, the heart of the enemy fleet. If they could take that down, it would disrupt the entire formation. "Fire," he ordered, his voice a low growl. The ship's cannons roared to life, unleashing a hail of fire that cut through the dark space. The blasts hit the Drazathi ship dead center, sending it into a violent spin. The explosion rocked the enemy fleet, but Nox didn't wait for confirmation. He gave the order to press the attack. "Now's our chance," Severin shouted from the weapons bay. With one final push, Nox dove the ship toward the heart of the enemy line, ducking and weaving through laser fire, the crew working together like a well-oiled machine. Their ship was agile, fast, but the Drazathi were relentless. Nox's grip tightened on the controls as he directed their ship into a high-speed maneuver, narrowly avoiding another barrage of deadly blasts. The Drazathi ship was in their sights again, and Nox didn't hesitate. A direct hit exploded its main reactor, the resulting fireball lighting up the blackness of space like a star-gone supernova. But the battle was far from over. "More ships incoming," Leia warned. "We're not out of the woods yet." Nox's heart raced. The Drazathi had been stunned, but they had too many ships, too many weapons. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a fight for their future. Nox's voice rang out, unwavering. "We're human, and we don't back down." The darkness of space seemed to stretch forever, the stars distant and cold as Nox's ship weaved through the debris of the battle. The Drazathi fleet was relentless, their warships swarming like a nest of angry hornets. The human ship, battered but still functional, danced in the chaos. But Nox knew this wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was the final push to stop the Drazathi Empire from crushing everything they had fought for. "We can't keep this up much longer." Juno's voice crackled over the comms, strained. "Our engines are starting to give." Nox gritted his teeth. The damage was evident. The shields were down to 30%, and their weapon systems had been severely weakened from the last exchange. They were outgunned, outmanned, and surrounded. But retreat wasn't an option, not when they were so close. "Hold on," Nox replied, his voice calm but firm. "We're not running. We're going to finish this." The Drazathi flagship loomed large in the distance, the dark ship glowing with hostile energy. Its weapons charged, ready to unleash destruction. Nox could feel the weight of the moment pressing in. If they didn't take that flagship down, the entire fleet would fall into enemy hands, and humanity's efforts would be in vain. "Leia, can you get us to that flagship?" Nox asked, eyes fixed on the looming ship. "I'm going to need a miracle," Leia said, her voice tight, but determination seeping through. "But if I can just get us close, I'll give you an opening." The ship jolted as another blast rocked it, the hull groaning in protest. Nox didn't flinch. This was the moment. He could feel it in his bones. "We're going in," Nox said, standing from his seat and striding toward the back of the ship. "Prepare for boarding. Severin, you're with me." Severin nodded without hesitation. The crew, though exhausted and battered, was ready. They had fought too long, too hard, to back down now. Outside, the Drazathi flagship fired, its laser blasts piercing the void, but Leia's deft hands on the controls swung their ship into a sharp dive, narrowly avoiding a hit. The Drazathi ships, momentarily stunned by their maneuver, hesitated, just long enough for Nox to make his move. "Now, Leia," Nox yelled. The ship shot forward, rocketing straight toward the enemy flagship. The moment they were within range, Leia activated the cloaking system, making their ship momentarily invisible to the Drazathi sensors. It was a slim chance, but it was all they had. The flagship's weapons fired blindly, missing by mere meters as Nox and his team launched their boarding pods. The pods shot through the void, slamming into the Drazathi vessel's hull with explosive force. The crew's boots hit the metal floors of the flagship with a resounding clang. Nox felt the adrenaline surge, his heartbeat in sync with the thudding of heavy boots as his team stormed the hallways. The Drazathi were scattered, caught off guard by the sudden invasion. They weren't expecting a human assault. "Move, move, move," Severin shouted, her voice a razor's edge. They cut through the corridors, their weapons blazing. Drazathi soldiers fell before them, but Nox knew this wasn't going to be easy. The Drazathi were desperate, their retaliations vicious, but humanity had a tenacity they didn't understand. They'd reached the central control room, the heart of the ship. A massive door stood in their way, heavily armored, but Nox had no time for delays. He gave the order, and Severin's soldiers set explosives. The blast tore the door off its hinges, revealing the Drazathi command center. The Drazathi leader, a towering figure cloaked in black armor, stood at the center, flanked by his elite guards. The final confrontation. The Drazathi leader's eyes burned with fury. "You think you can defeat an empire? Your people will fall." Nox stepped forward, his voice a low growl. "You underestimate humans." The battle was fierce, clashing weapons, exploding energy blasts, and the echoing roar of combat filled the room. Nox's team fought with everything they had, and for a moment, it felt as if time itself had slowed. They pushed forward, overwhelming the Drazathi elite guard. Nox reached the leader, his face hard with resolve. With one final move, Nox disarmed the Drazathi leader, knocking him to the ground. The room fell silent. "We win," Nox said, his voice unwavering. "This ends now." The control room fell into chaos, but the tide had turned. The Drazathi flagship was theirs. The crew, battered but alive, stood victorious. As Nox looked out at the stars, the weight of the battle hung heavy, but he knew humanity had taken its place in the galaxy. The Drazathi Empire was on the brink of collapse, and their message had been clear. Humanity had won, and no one would forget it.